Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we build a serverless chat app using React and Firebase. If that makes sense, make sure you smash the like button. Ensure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell notification so you can get access to all of our videos in the future as they drop. As the topic for today implies, we'll be building a serverless chat app using React and Firebase from Google. And as such, we are going to cover the following talking points over the course of this video. We are going to look at the project walkthrough. We are going to install and set up Firebase. We are going to integrate Firebase into our project. We are going to hook up our app with Firebase so that our users can create accounts, and we are going to set up the authentication using Firebase. Finally, we are going to do our chat integration with Firebase Firestore, that is sending and receiving messages. Once again, if this video makes sense to you, then ensure you absolutely smash the like button so others can find it too. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell notification so you can get access to all of our videos in the future as they drop. You can find the link to the code on GitHub via the link in the description, okay? So let's dive into the coding for today's video, starting with the project walkthrough. So what I've got here is a React project that I set up with it, and this React project is using TypeScript. I've also set up Tailwind with this project. I just didn't want to waste your time by showing you how I set up all that project. I have so many videos where I've set up a React project with TypeScript from scratch. So if you're interested in seeing how to do that, then you can go back and watch some of our previous videos. Then you can come back onto this one, okay? I'm just going to briefly walk you through this project that we have set up here, okay? I'm going to do that starting with this tailwind config.js file, okay? And this is just the configuration file for Tailwind. And what this does here is just to show you that we are using Tailwind for styling our project, okay? Now let's move into our src folder. And inside this src folder, the first thing we are going to look at is this main.tsx file, okay? And this file is standard with all React templates. I didn't mess with this file. I didn't change anything with this file. This is just the way it is when you set up a React project with Vite. Now let's move on from this main.tsx file and let's go into the app.tsx file, okay? And you can see that inside this app.tsx file, you can see that we are importing the router provider from React router DOM. And after that, you can see that I am importing this router object from /navigation/index. And we are going to look at that file shortly, okay? Now inside this app.css file, we create a functional component named app, and then we just return our router provider, and we set the router prop on this router provider to be equal to the router objects we imported from navigation/index, okay? So let's quickly jump into that navigation folder and let's look at the index.css file. Now I'm inside that index.css file, and you can see that first of all we import create browser router from React router DOM, then import the login page from pages auth/login. We also import screens object from /constants.ts. We are going to take a look at this file shortly. Then we import another component, create account from /pages auth register. We also import a third component, dashboard from pages/dashboard, okay? Now this is where we create our router objects we imported inside our main.css file, okay? So this router object is created by calling this create browser router function, which we imported from React router DOM. This accepts an array of objects as its arguments, and the objects inside this array are used to specify the paths that are allowed for application and the components that is going to load up when we navigate to that path, okay? You can see that we have an index path, and the component for that index path is the login page. We have a login path, and the component for that path is the login page. We have a register path, and the component for that path is the create account component. Then finally, we have a home screen path, and the component for that home screen path is the dashboard component, okay? So let's take a look at this screens object we imported from /constants.ts. You can see that this screen object has three properties: a home property, which is equal to /home, a login property, which is equal to /login, and a register property, which is equal to /register, okay? And take note that we are exporting this file, these objects from this file, okay? Now we are done with that. Let's jump into our pages folder, and the first thing we are going to look at in our pages folder is our auth folder. I'm going to open up this auth folder. You can observe that we have two folders nested inside. we have the login folder and the register folder. So let's go ahead and take a look at the login folder first. Now inside this login folder, we have an index.css file. Now let me open up this file and just quickly walk you through this file. Okay, inside of this file, you can see that we import link from React Router DOM, and then we also import the screens object from navigation/constant. Here we are creating a component named login page, and we are exporting this component as default from this file. Okay, so this component just contains the form that allows our user to log in with their username and password. Okay, right, you can see that we have an input field here. They can enter their username. We also have another input field here. They can enter their password. Okay, then after that, we have a button that allows them to always stay logged in. That is this remember me button. We also have another link for them to reset their password in case they forgot their password. I don't think we'll be implementing this for now. We have another button under that allows the user to sign up. And finally, there's a component with a button that allows the user to navigate to the register page. That is if they have not created an account. Okay, so now we have looked at this login page. Let us jump into the register page. Okay, I'm going to open up this register folder and navigate to index.css file. And inside of this index.css file, inside the register folder, you can see that we are importing the link element and the use navigate hook from React Router DOM. We also import these screens objects from navigation/constants. Then we import the form event type from React. Now we have created a component inside of this file named create account, which we are exporting as default from this file. Okay, inside this component, we create a variable named navigate, which is equal to the result of calling the use navigate hook, which we import from React Router DOM. We have also created a function here named handle submit. This function is just a function for processing our form whenever it is submitted. Okay, I have an event here which is of type form event, and inside this function we first call event.prevent default, then we navigate to the home screen. Okay, you should know that inside of this form we are going to write our logic for creating a user, but we have not done that for now. Okay, however, we are going to do that to progress in this video. Okay, you can see that we have a form here, and the onSubmit handler for this form is equal to the handle submit function we created. You can see that we have an input field where we allow the user to enter their full name. We also have another input field where we allow the user to enter their username, and finally we have another input field where we allow the user to enter their password. We have a button for creating an account which we sign up, and under that button we have a div that has a link element, and this link element allows us to navigate to the login page. That is if we have already created an account. Okay, so what we are going to do is to jump into the dashboard folder to see what it looks like. So let me go ahead and open up this dashboard folder. I can see that inside of this dashboard folder I have a component folder. I have an index.css file. So let's look at this index.css file first. Okay, inside this index.css file, can see that we are importing app bar from components/app bar. We also import the chart component from components/chart component. We are importing the right sidebar from components/right sidebar, and we also import the sidebar from components/sidebar. We create a variable here, dashboard, and we are exporting this dashboard as default from this file. Okay, inside of this dashboard function, we are just going to return a bit of UI. We have a wrapper div that's surrounding all the elements, and inside of that div, next the app bar, which is followed by the sidebar, which is followed by the chart component, and then the right sidebar. Okay, so let's quickly jump into the components folder and the dashboard folder. Okay, now inside of this components folder, you can see that we have a bunch of components. You can see that we have our app bar component, right? I'm not going to spend much time going over the contents of this file because while we are progressing, or over the course of this video, we are going to be implementing some of the functions that our application is going to be able to carry out. You actually see me interact with this component. Okay, so you get more understanding what is inside. You can see we have another component named the assets component. Okay, same thing with that one. I'm not going to spend much time over that. Okay, but we are going to see how this asset component works over the course of this video. You can see that we have that component inside this dashboard /components folder, and the name of that component is the chart component.css. Let me open up this file. You can see that inside this file we are importing the divider component from / divider. Importing the received message component from / received message. We are importing the send message component from / send message. We also import the sent message component from / sent. Take note, these two components are not the same, okay? One is send message and one is sent message. After that, we create a variable named chat component, and we are exporting this variable as default from this file. Inside this chat component, we have div that's wrapping all our elements, and inside this div, we have divider component, we have a received message component, we nest a sent message component, and finally we nest a received message component. Now, after the div that's wrapping the divider, the received message, the sent message, we also have component which we nest under that div, right? The name of that component is send message component, and I'm going to emphasize again, there's a difference between the send message component and the sent message component, okay? The send message component allows us to send a message, while the sent message component allows us to view a message we have sent, okay? So when we are done building this our app, we're actually going to see the difference between the two of them. Now let's open up this divider.txs file, okay? This is just a simple file, and this component just have a divider that accepts a prop text. Now the default value for this text is Sunday, and we nest that text inside the paragraph element here, right? Let's open up this receive.css file, and this is the component that allows us to view messages that has been sent to us. We have a right sidebar component. The function of this right sidebar component is to view the user's profile, okay? Don't worry much about the contents of this file. While over the course of this video, as we implement the functions that are related to this sidebar component, you will see all the elements and nesting inside of this and how this component is supposed to work, because I've not implemented the features for our app. I just use this user interface and I'm just walking you through it, okay? I don't want to spend much time doing that. I'm trying to do that as fast as possible, okay? Now let's go ahead and open the send message component. Like I said earlier, this send message component allows you to send a message, okay? After that, we have the sent.txs file. And this file has a component sent message, and this allows us to view messages that we have sent. Now, last but not the least, we have a sidebar.txs file, okay? And this component contains the sidebar for our application, okay? So that's just pretty much all we have for our template. I'm going to go ahead and serve on this application locally by opening up a terminal and hitting npm run dev to spin up the local development server so we can preview our application, get a glimpse of what it looks like. So now our app is running in our server. I'm going to go ahead and copy the link to our app from our terminal. I'm going to open up a browser tab. So let's just wait for this browser tab to open up. Give that a minute. With our browser tab open up, I'm going to go ahead and navigate to localhost 5173 so we can see what our application looks like, okay? Let's just wait for our app to load up inside of our browser so we can get a glimpse of what it looks like, okay? Our app is loading up and should be done in a bit. Just hold on. I don't know why it's taking some time. Just exercise a little bit of patience, and we are just going to see what our app looks like shortly, okay? And voila, you can see this is the login page, okay? Now let me go ahead and hit this create account button, which takes us to the home, the register page where we can create an account. I'm going to go ahead and hit this sign up button, and it's going to take us to the dashboard, okay? So this is what our application looks like. You can see sidebar. This is the sidebar. This is the app bar. This is the right sidebar. This is the received message component. This is the asset component. Why this is the sent message component, okay? Let me just go ahead and comment out this right sidebar component so we can have a full view of what this chat component looks like, okay? We're going to first that we'll go back to our application. We're going to open up the pages folder, open up the dashboard folder, open up the components, open up the index.css file, and comment out this right sidebar. Save, go back to our browser. You can see that the right sidebar has gone away, so we can have a good glimpse of what this chat component looks like. So now you have gotten a glimpse of what our application looks like, and you have seen our folder structure. We're going to go ahead to implement the methods and the functions of this application. And remember, like from the title of this video, this is a serverless chat that is going to be built on Firebase. Okay, let's dive into that, integrating Firebase into our application. The next thing we are going to do is to install Firebase. Okay, open up a terminal and run npm install Firebase to install Firebase as a dependency for our app. We head to the home page for Firebase, click on the go to console button. This takes us to our Firebase console page where we can click on create a project. We're going to give this project a name of chat app. Then we'll click on continue. We'll select the default account for Firebase and click on create project. Wait for Firebase to create that project for us. With our project created for us, we are going to register a new web app named web app. We head back to the project on VS Code where we will create a new file named firebase settings.ts. Then we'll paste in the Firebase config which we have copied from our Firebase console when we registered a web app. Okay, we import get Firestore from Firebase /Firestore. We're also going to import get auth from Firebase /auth. Let's create and export a variable named db which is equal to the result of calling the get Firestore function just imported. Okay, so let's create and export another variable auth which is equal to the result of calling the get auth function. Let's head over to the pages /auth /register /index.css file where we add new name property to the input feed where the user will enter their full name. Okay, when they want to create an account which is equal to full name, we add a name property to the username field which is equal to username. We'll also add a name property to the password input field which is equal to password. Then we'll create a new file inside the root /src folder and name this file helper.ts. This module will export all of the functions for interacting with our app. We import the variable from the Firebase settings file. Then we'll create a new function named create account which is an async function that accepts a username argument which is a string, a full name argument which is also a string, and a password argument which is a string. Inside this function, we add a try catch block, and inside the catch block we will return an array where the first item is any error encountered while trying to create the user account, and the second item will be null since we don't have any value to send back to the user. Inside the try block, we will create a new variable user which is equal to the result of calling the create user with email and password function which we will import from Firebase /auth. Then we change the username argument to email argument because Firebase only allows us to create an account with an email and a password. We will pass the object as the first argument to the function, followed by the email as the second argument. Then the password is the last argument. We're going to import update profile from Firebase /auth. We will call await update profile function, passing in the user object as the first argument to it, followed by an object with the property display name which will be equal to the full name argument. Then we return an array with null as the first value inside since there are no errors. Then the user will be the second argument. We'll ensure we export this function from this module. Okay, we'll create and export another function named login which is equal to an async function, accepts an argument email which is a string and a password argument which is also a string. Inside this function we add a try catch block, and inside the catch block we return an array where the first item is any error encountered while trying to log in the user account. The second item will be null since we don't have any data to send back to the user. Inside the try block we will destructure at a variable user which is obtained from calling await sign in with email and password which we import from Firebase /auth. When we pass in the auth object we imported from Firebase settings as the first argument to the sign in with email and password function, followed by the email and then the password of the user. We are going to accept a third argument on the login function. This argument should be named saved session and it will be a boolean. After we call await sign in with email and password, we check if saved session is true. Then we will save the user's UID to local storage using a key of user ID. Then we will return an array with null as the first value inside since there are no errors, and then the user will be the second value inside. We'll head back to the create account function, and right above the return statement in the try block we will call await setDoc. SetDoc function is imported from Firebase /Firestore which we use to add a new document inside. We are going to use this setDoc function to add a new document inside the user's collection. Okay, this document we have an email property and a full name property which is equal to the full name and email arguments we are accepting in this function. This just says to create a new user document anytime a user registers an account. Then we head back to auth/register/index.css, where we make some adjustments to our form by changing the username input field to an email input field. We'll also change the input field of the login function from username to email. I've copied and pasted some code here, so let me quickly explain it. I have created a function named handle submit, which is equal to an async function. This function accepts an event object which is of a form event. Inside this function called e.prevent default, then with the structure add the email and password values from the form. Take note, we have created a ref object which points to the login form. Then we will use the values obtained from this form to log in the user. Okay, if there are any errors while trying to log in the user, we'll alert the user that there's an error logging into the account. Then we can also log the error. Otherwise, we'll just navigate to the home screen. Let's head back to the app to try to log in. It should fail because there is no user account yet, and actually it does. You can see the error we get back in the console reads error auth configuration not found. Let's head back to our VS Code where we navigate to start page to make some updates to the create account component. First, I have some code which I've also copied and pasted inside the create account component, which I'm just going to explain shortly. I have created a variable navigate, which is equal to the result of calling the use navigate hook, which we import from React Router DOM. Next, we create a form ref object, which is basically a pointer to the registration form. Next, we have a function handle submit, which accepts an event object as its argument. Inside the function, we call event.prevent default. First, we structure out the email, password, and full name variables from the form. Then we use those values to create a new account by calling the create user account function. If there's an error while trying to create the user, we alert the user that there's an error trying to create the account. We'll also log the error to the console. Okay, if the user account is created successfully, then we are going to alert them that the account has been created successfully and redirect them to the home screen. Okay, we'll open up a browser tab, try to create a user account, which should also fail with the same error as when we did try to log in. However, we have observed that there is no way to notify the user that their input is being processed, and as such, we need to add a loader state to inform the user that their input is being processed. We will open up VS Code and navigate to auth/register/index.css, where we will add a new state variable is loading. Inside the handle submit function, we'll call the set is loading function to update is loading to true. That is, loading has started. And after the call to await create user account, we can now call set is loading it false. We'll change the sign up button. Okay, so first we'll check if it's loading is true, and then we'll return a loader. Otherwise, we just return the text sign up. If we head back to the browser, you can see the loader SVG we have just added, and it's a bit distorted, so we need to make it look pretty. Set up size of the SVG be 20, then we'll change the color of the stroke for white. Then we'll add a text loaded next to the spinner. Okay, I'm just going to ensure that I center everything inside of this button. Next, I'm going to create a new file inside pages/dashboard/components.ts named notification.ts, and I'll paste in some content which I've copied. This content just allows us to create a custom alert for our user. Okay, you can see from the terminal that I have already an npm install react toastify to install react toastify. Okay, this command installs this react toastify library and helps us with creating custom alert. Okay, so instead of using the built-in alert function to notify the user, we'll be using our own custom alert to notify the user of any message or of any error. Okay, so let's navigate to auth/register/index.css, where we will be using the custom alert which we have already set up. We'll replace the call to the alert function inside the handle submit function. Okay, so we'll call to the notify function, which we import from dashboard/component/notification.css. Then we will pass in the notification component, which we also import from the dashboard/component/notification.css. Then we will set the message prop or the notification component to be the error creating account. We'll pass in a config object as a second argument to the notify function. This allows us to customize the background and other aspects of our component using a class name property. Okay, if the user account is created successfully, we'll fire a custom component first before redirecting them to the home screen. Let's head back to the browser to try to create a new account, which we do. If you observe, we don't get any errors in the console or any custom alert. You're able to sort this out shortly. Make sure you enable the authentication API and the Firestore service for the Firebase console before you actually go out and test this authentication and Firebase Firestore database. Okay, that's why we were getting the auth error configuration was not found message. Okay, in our console when we are trying to create a new account previously. Now let's head back to the login form to do the same thing, that is to add a loading state variable and also conditionally render out a loader or a button with text that reads login based on whether whether or not this loading is true, just like we did on the registration form. We also ensure to fire a custom alert in place of the built-in alert. We head back to the browser to test the login form out. We'll fill out the form and click the login button to log in, which we do successfully, but still we get no custom alert. So let's head to the notify homepage to find a solution to this problem. You can see that we need to import the CSS for React Toastify in the src/app.css file. Then we import the toast component from widgets/dashboard/component/notification.css, and next that component under the app component. Now if we head back to our browser, try to log in again, this time we should see a custom alert. You can see that we get a toast at the top right corner of our page saying error logging in. Okay, now let's properly handle any errors that arise from trying to create or log into your account. Okay, we'll open up the project on VS Code and navigate to auth/login/index.css. We will add a new state variable as error, which is a boolean. Inside the handle submit function, we'll check if there are any errors after we try to log in the user. If we check there's an error and the error includes auth/invalid credentials, we're going to pause first before we process that, and let's just head onto the helper file to modify the login function a bit. Okay, we'll typecast the return type from the function to be a promise with an array. The first value is of error or not, and the second value is of a user or not type. Okay, then we'll head back to the login function. If the error includes /invalid credentials, we'll call set has error with true to update the has error state variable, and then I'm going to modify the input fields on the form such that if there are any errors, we'll change the input field to be red for the email input field, and this is also for the password input field. I'll open up your browser and try to log in again, and this time you can see that even before we try to log in, all the input fields all have a red border. Even after refreshing the web page, we need to head to where we define the has error state variable and set its initial value to false. We also set has error to false each time handle submit button is called before we try to log in the user. Okay, if we head back to the browser to try to log in again with the wrong password, get an error alert. We don't get no red buttons. We need to head back to our code in the login component where we process the errors to check if the error dot includes. Okay, so this is where the error is coming from. We need to change from error dot includes to if error dot message dot includes. And this time, if I head back to the browser, try to log in again with the wrong password, we should get an error alert, and we also get a red border around the input feed, that is the email input feed and the password input feed. Okay, we'll head back to the project of VS Code. We will navigate to the register/index.css file to do the same thing. First, we'll add a has email error state variable, and then we'll go into the handle submit function. First, we'll change the property on the config object we pass to notify function from class name to style, which will be an object for modifying the component style. We will set the background property to red and the color to white. Then we'll check if the error.messages.includes /email already in use. Then we'll set has email error to true and use this value to conditionally render out a red border around the email input feed. There's an error. We head back to the browser to try to create an account with an email that already exists. You should get a red border around that component. Okay, so let's head back to VS Code. Then before we try to create the user account, set the has email error to false. Then we'll create another state variable has password error, and inside the handle submit function, we'll call the set has password error to false before we try to process the form to log in the user. Then we'll check if the error.messages includes /weak password. Then we call the set has password error with true. Also conditionally render out a red border around the password input feed if the has password error is true. We head back to our browser to try to create an account with a short password. You should get a red border around the password component. Okay, so I'm going to go to my dashboard on Firebase and delete all of the user accounts from the alt tab. I've also deleted the entire user collection from the Firebase Firestore. Okay, so I'll open up another browser tab with our uploaded. I'll try to create a new account with the name of John Doe and an email of john@gmail.com with a password of first1234. You can see that we successfully navigate to the home screen. I'm going to head over to the console on Firebase to verify that that user account is created successfully. You can see the user account in the alt section, and you can see that we also have users collection in the Firebase Firestore database. Okay, I'm going to create another user account, the name Kinani Samson, an email address. That is the account created successfully. successfully. We head back to the project on VS Code. Let's go back to the handle submit method where we check if the user is created successfully. We are going to get rid of the custom alert we used to notify the user successfully the successful login because it is not necessary at all. We head back to the browser tab, create another account. Then let's head back to the project on VS Code. We'll navigate to the dashboard /components/sidebar.css file. Inside this file, we need to locate the section of the component and we hold the row of users have registered an account with the app. Now we have identified the section, we navigate to the helper file. We will create and export a new function named getUser. This function will be responsible for retrieving users registered on the app, okay? And inside of this function, we'll create a stateful variable Q, which is the result of calling the collection function, which is imported from Firebase Firestore. This function allows us to create a reference to a collection by calling the collection function by passing in the DB object and the first argument to the function. The second argument is the name of the collection, and this instance it will be users. We'll create another variable docs, which is equal to the result of calling the query function by passing in the collection reference we just created as the first argument to the query function, okay? Then we import the where function from Firebase and use the where function to find users whose full name is not equal to an argument name which we accept in this function, okay? We are supposed to use the ID of the user, not their name. Take note. Next, we are going to create another stateful variable snapshot that will store the result of calling the await get docs function, okay? This get docs function is also imported from Firebase. We pass in the docs object as an argument to the get docs function. Then we are going to call the query snapshot.docs.map to convert the object returned from the query to an object you can work with, okay? We ensure that each object has an ID property. Then we wrap the function implementation with a try-catch block as a standard with all our function implementations. Let's head back to the dashboard /components/sidebar CSS file. We will create a new stateful variable named users. Then we'll add a use effect hook. Inside the use effect hook, we try to fetch the existing users. But first, we'll pause with the function execution and head over to the helper file, specifically get users function. We will strongly type the response type from the function to be a promise with an array. Then the type of the first value is error or no, and the type of the second value is a document data or no. Document data is imported from Firebase Firestore, okay? So we head back to the dashboard /components/sidebar.css file. So we'll continue with the use effect hook implementation. We'll rename the function to underscore get users. Then we'll import the get user function from the helper file and call it with an empty string as the first argument to the function. Then we'll update the user stateful variable with the value returned from the get users function, okay? We are going to console log the user stateful variable. We head over to a browser tab to test this out. You can see that we have an array with 3 objects inside matching the user objects, okay? So let's head over to our code. We'll try to retrieve the user which is currently logged in, and to do this we are going to create a new variable current user inside the underscore get users function. This value is equal to the current user. If the current user is null, then we'll navigate to the home login screen, okay? We'll pass the display name property on the current user as an argument to the get user function. Then we'll label the section of the sidebar that is responsible for showing all other users. We'll loop through the users array and return a bit of UI for each user. That is just an avatar with the user's initial inside and the user's name underneath it, okay? If we head to the browser, you can see that there are 2 users that have registered onto our app. Our next target would be to allow the login user to click on another user and to be able to send him or her a message. Also need to load up this selected user into the nav bar and into the right sidebar. So let's proceed, okay? We'll head back to the project on VS Code where I'll navigate to the dashboard /index.css file where I will create a new variable above the dashboard component definition. This variable will have a name dashboard context and it will be the result of calling the create context method which is imported from React, okay? And if you guess what you are trying to do, if you guess that we are trying to create a React context, then you're absolutely spot on, okay? We'll strongly type the values on the context to be a partial of an object with a show right sidebar property which is a boolean, a set show right sidebar property, so dispatch function for updating the set right sidebar, the show right sidebar property. We'll also come down into the dashboard component where we'll create a new stateful variable show right sidebar which will be false. We'll name the dispatch function for updating the show right sidebar to set show right sidebar. And I'm going to use the dashboard context of provider to wrap all the components inside the dashboard component. Then we will set the value property on the context to be an object with a show right sidebar and a set show right sidebar property, both of which have already been defined above. Then we'll ensure that only the right sidebar and the show right sidebar is true. Okay, head over to the browser, observe that the right sidebar is not visible again. Head back to the project on VS Code and navigate to the dashboard/index.css file. We'll add a new user property on the dashboard context type named select chart, and this is going to be a string. We'll also add another property, update selected chart. It's a function for updating the selected chart property. Inside this file, we'll import use context from React and we'll also import the dashboard context. We'll extract the selected chart property as a new variable from inside of that chart component file. We'll conditionally render at the content of the chart component based on the values of the selected charts. If we head back to the browser, see that the content of the chart component are no longer visible. Okay, let's head back to the project on VS Code. We will navigate to dashboard/component/app_bar.css file. We will import the use context from React and we'll also import the dashboard context from the root src index.css file. We'll extract the selected chart property as a new variable. Then we'll identify the section of the app bar that is responsible for showing the user details and conditionally render it out based on the value of the selected chart. If you head over to the browser, you observe that the user details in the app is no longer visible. So we'll head back to the project on VS Code and navigate to dashboard/sidebar.css file. We'll import the use context from React and we'll also import the dashboard context. We'll stack the update selected chart property as a new variable in this component. Inside the onClick handler, we'll call update selected chart and pass in the ID of the user as an argument to the update selected chart function. Then we'll head over to the dashboard/component/app_bar.css file where we'll console log the selected chart property. If you head over to the browser and anytime we click on the user, we'll observe that the user profile in the app bar becomes visible and then the contents of the chart component becomes visible. We'll head back to the project on VS Code and navigate to the helper file where we will create and export a new variable getUser. It's an async function that accepts a user_id argument, which is a string. Inside this function, we are going to retrieve the user whose ID matches the user_id argument. Then we'll ensure we strongly type the return type from this function. Okay. Then we'll navigate to the dashboard/component/app_bar.css where we'll add a use effect for retrieving the details of the selected user based on the value of the selected chart using the getUser function we just created. Then we'll create a new stateful variable named chartUser. We'll ensure we call setChartUser updates the chartUser stateful variable with the data returned from the getUser function. Then we'll console log the chartUser stateful variable. We head over to the browser and you can see in the console that we have a user object being logged at. Okay, let's head back to the project on VS Code, specifically the app bar section where we'll replace the placeholder data with the user's initials and their name. Then we'll open up a browser tab to preview our application. You can see that the actual user is being shown in the app bar anytime we click on the user in the history section. Okay, we'll head back to the project on VS Code. Then we'll create a new file named types.ts inside the src folder. Inside this file, we'll create and export an interface chart which extends from document data. This interface will only have one property ID, which is a string for now. Next, we'll create and export another interface message which extends from document data. This interface, we have an ID property which is a string, created art property which is a number, a text content property which is a string. Then we'll create and export another interface user which also extends from document data. This interface have an ID property and a full name property, both of which are strings. Then we'll continue with the message interface definition. We'll add an encoder property which will be a user interface. We'll also add a decoder property which will be a user interface. Then we'll add a status property which will be a narrow string. We'll add an event property which is a string, an asset URL property which is a string array. Okay, we'll continue with the chat interface definition and add a message property which will be an array of messages. Then we'll add a user property which will be an array of users. Okay, we navigate to the helper file and you can see that we already have a get chat function we have defined here. So let's update this function. First, we'll change the type of the second value in array and it will be of type chat or none. Okay, we'll do the same for the get user function. We'll change the type of the second value in the array and to be of type user. So this will conflict the user type we are importing from Firebase/auth. Thus, we import our own user as user type types file. Then the return type will be a user type object. Okay, we'll do this for all the functions we have defined that was returning the document data object, and then we'll navigate to the dashboard/components/chat-component.css. Okay, where we'll create a new stateful variable named chat. Then we'll add the use effect hook, and inside that use effect hook, we'll try to use the selected chat variable to fetch the selected user. Then we'll create another stateful variable named chat user. After we fetch the user, we'll await a call to the get chat with users function by passing in two user objects with an ID property on them. The first ID is the ID of the user that is currently logged in, and the second ID is that of the user they want to chat with. We'll process any errors returned from calling this function, and in fact, you can see that this use effect hook is getting out of hand. So the proper thing to do would be to create a separate use effect hook for fetching the chat. That would duplicate the current use effect hook, then we'll update it and console log the chat. Then we'll only render out the chat UI, that is the message is sent from one user to the other, if there's a selected chat user and a chat variable. Okay, then we'll navigate to the send message component. Here we need to identify the individual sections in this component, like send button, emoji button, and label them accordingly. Okay, we'll give the input field, that is where we enter the message we want to send, a name of message. We'll label the attachment button and the message input. We'll import the dashboard context and extract out the selected chat value. We'll navigate to the chat component.tsx file, where we'll copy the use effect for fetching the chat user. We'll fix the imports for this file and create a second stateful variable, which is a user type. We'll navigate to the helper file, where we'll define and export a new function, send message, which is an async function that accepts an argument message, which is a partial of a message. This allows us to add a new message to the database. Okay, this function will also accept a chat underscore ID argument, which is a string. We'll fetch a chat snapshot from the database, and if it exists, we'll add a message to the chat.messages array and update the chat in the database. However, if the chat does not exist, then we'll create and save a new chat object. Let's navigate to the send message component, where we'll create a new function handle submit. Then we'll create a form ref object. We'll set the ref object on the form to be the form ref we just created. Then we'll head back to the handle submit form function, where we'll obtain the value of the message input field. We'll navigate to dashboard/index.css file, where we'll create a chat user stateful variable. We'll also create a selected user ID stateful variable. We'll edit the type definition for the dashboard context, and we'll add a selected user ID, which is a string. We'll add a set selected user ID, which is a dispatch for updating selected user ID property. We'll also add a chat user property and a set chat user property. We'll also modify the type for the selected chat from a string to a chat. Do the same for the update selected chat. Then we'll set the chat user to be a user and the set chat user will be a dispatch for updating the chat user. Since we already have all of these values set up for us, we'll pass them as the value for the dashboard context.provider. Then we'll copy the use effect for fetching the selected user from the chat component to the dashboard/index.css. We'll sort out the errors with the missing imports and missing variables. We'll also copy the use effect for fetching the chat from the component/chat component to the dashboard/index.css file. We'll delete the use effect we have copied from the chat pod/component. This is because we are using these two use effects a lot, okay, and in different components. So it will be better if we define them as hooks that can be used in each of those components to reduce the code duplication. Okay, so we'll create a hooks folder. Inside of this folder, we'll create a new file named usefetchChatUser.ts. Then we'll paste in the use effects for fetching a chat user inside a function, which we will name usefetchChatUser. We'll sort the import and the missing variable so we can get rid of all these annoying error messages. This function will accept an object as its argument. The object we have a selected chat user property is a string, and an identify property is a function. Identify function is fired when we encounter any error while trying to fetch the user. We are already using the selected chat user to find the chat user, so we need to add another property to the argument we are passing to the usefetchChatUser hook. This is a set chat user property. It's a side effect to updating the chat user stateful variable. If a user exists, then we'll call the set chat user function to update the chat user stateful variable. So let's navigate to dashboard/index.css, where we'll import and call the usefetchChatUser hook. Let's copy the use effect hook for fetching a chat. Next, we'll navigate to the dashboard/hooks folder, where we'll create a new file named the usefetchChat. Inside of this file, we declare and export a function whose name matches the name of the file we just created. Inside this function, we will paste in the use effects for fetching a chat. We need to update it, import missing modules, and adjust the implementation to get rid of any error
errors. We also accept an argument using an object identifier property, which is a function. Chat user property is a user type and it's our own custom type for user. And finally, a site chat property, which is a function for updating the chat state variable. We head back to the dashboard /index.css file where I'll import the use get chat hook and call it in this file by passing in the object of the right type to it as its argument. Since we need to use notify function with the use get chat, we extract it into its own variable so it can be used with both hooks, reducing code duplication again. We need to get rid of some import statements that is no longer needed. So let's navigate to the sidebar.css file where we'll extract the set selected user ID property from the dashboard context. Then we will call this function with a user ID to update the selected user property, okay, replacing the update selected chat property. You can see that we are now tidying up our code base here, okay. So let's navigate to the dashboard /components /chat components.css file, erasing all stateful variables you have declared in this component. We'll get rid of all the imports we don't need, and then we destructure out the selected chat property. We will now only render out the chat UI if the selected chat has a value. Let's head back to the dashboard /components /send message.css file. You can see that I have already removed the use effect statements we have defined earlier in this component. Now we'll discard all of the values we don't need anymore. Then we'll destructure out the chat user property from the dashboard context, okay. Let's continue with this handle submit function. We'll pass the selected chat.id property as the second argument to the send message function. Then we'll start adding properties to the message argument we are passing as the first argument to the send message function. The object will have a created app property, decoder property, that is the person receiving the message. The object will also have an encoder property, it is the person sending the message. The object will have a text content property, an event property, and a status property. They will console log any error we encounter while trying to send a message. As the handle submit function as the value to the submit attribute on the form, okay. Let's add the dashboard /components /appbar.css file. We will get rid of all the use effect hook definition and all of the stateful variables we've declared earlier. Let's destructure out the chat user from the dashboard context, okay. Then we'll replace all references to the selected chat with the chat user. Let's also get rid of all the import statements we no longer need in this file. We rid ourselves of all these annoying red lines. Let's open up the browser tab to preview the app. You can observe that we get so many error alerts in these alerts already. Don't panic, we will all sort them out accordingly. I'm going to reload the app and log into my account. You can see that most of the error has already gone away. We still have one that is persisting. Our hook seems to keep running over and over again. That is, we need to address that first. We head back to the project on VS Code and navigate to the use fetch chat user hook where we'll ensure that the selected user ID is the only value in the use effect dependency array, okay. We'll do the same for the use get chat hook. We'll ensure the chat user is the only value in the use effect dependency array. Then we'll head back to the browser, refresh and log in again. We are still getting these errors. Let's open up console to see what's wrong. So if you look at the console, you can see a Firebase error. Maximum of one array contains filter is allowed by this junction, okay. Now you can see the issues with the limit to Firebase queries we can make. We need to head back to the project on VS Code and navigate to the helper file. We can update the send message function. We'll make sure the chat_id variable is optional, and if the chat_id argument has a value, we'll fetch the chat with that ID and update its messages array. Otherwise, we'll create a new chat object to the dashboard /components /send message.css file. We'll update the handle submit function, and after we finish sending the user the message, there are no errors. We'll set the value of the message input feed be an empty string. We'll create a new variable _messages before we send a message to the decoder. This variable will store the message object we are trying to send. Then we'll navigate to the dashboard /index.css file where we'll console log the selected chat. If you head over to the browser to test this out, you observe we get null as the value of the selected chat. So let's head back to VS Code and navigate to the helper file to update the get chat with users function. We'll replace where user array contains an object with an ID property which is equal to user.id to where users array contains user.id. We'll head over to the send message function and ensure that anytime we create a new chat, users array is an array of strings, okay, matching the encoder ID and the decoder ID. We'll head back to the types.ts file. We will change the type definition for the users array to be an array of strings. Then we'll head back to the helper file, specifically get chat with users function. After we query the database for chats and the current log user user belongs to. We'll loop through the documents returned and only retrieve the document where user 2 belongs to. We will head back to the browser to test this out. I'll refresh the page and log in. If we click on the chat we have with the first user, we get null because there's no chat with that user. But if we click on the second user, you can see that we have a chat in the console. If we navigate to the dashboard /components/components.css file, we will try to display the contents of the chat. We will loop through the selected chat.messages, and for each message, if the message encoder is the current user, then we want to display that message as a sent message. Let's head over to the browser where we reload the app, log in and try to retrieve the chats. You can see that clicking on the second user shows a chat UI with a sent message component. Okay, so let's head over to the project on VS Code and navigate to dashboard/components/sent-message.css file. We'll accept a prop message whose type is message. Then we'll render out the text content of the message. Use the international object to format the time the message was created and render it out so we see the hour and minute the message was sent. Let's go back to the chat component where we'll pass the message of the object as a prop to the send message component. Okay, let's briefly head to the sent message component where we will only render out the assets attached to the message. The assets URL is not null. We'll navigate to receive message components to do the same thing we just did for the sent message component. We'll output the initials of the encoder followed by the text content of the message, the date, after which we'll only render out the assets if the asset URL is not null. Now, if we go back to the browser, we should see a message we have previously sent. Let's head back to the project on VS Code. We'll navigate to the dashboard/components/send-message.css file. We'll update the handle submit method. After we set the value of the message to be an empty string, we'll fetch the chat with the message underscore ID variable return from sending the message. This is actually the chat ID, and this is just an instance of banning technique. Okay, then we'll destructure at the update selected chat variable from the dashboard context. If the chat returned exists, then I'll call the update selected chat with the chat. This is so that the chat is always updated anytime user sends a message. Okay, let's head back to our browser to test this out. I'm going to send a new message to something. Hello, are you there? And hello. Now we need to connect the users to the app such that if user A sends user B a message and user B is online, user B should be able to see the message immediately. The way a chat is supposed to work. I'm going to head back to the project of VS Code and navigate to the dashboard/index.css file where I will copy and paste in a use effect hook. Let me briefly explain what this does. Okay, first we need to get a reference to the chat document that is currently selected. This is from the perspective of both users. Okay, we'll list it for any changes that happen to the document using the onSnapshot method. Then we use the document return to us to update the selected chat variable. We'll wrap everything in a try catch block to help gracefully deal with errors. Let's open up a separate browser where we'll log in as Samson so we can test out the latest feature. Now we have successfully logged in. Let's select Team account so we can send him a message. You can see that we see the messages that Team has already sent us. Let's go ahead and reply him. Yes, Timothy. Let's head over to Timothy's account to check, and voila, just like magic, we see the message that Samson has sent us right away. Amazing, right? Now we need to show the list of chat user currently has. And for that, we head back to the project on VS Code and navigate to the dashboard/component/sidebar.css where we need to identify the section of this component that holds the chat list. Now we have just identified that section. Let's navigate to the helper file where we'll create a new from name, get user chats. Okay, this is an async function that sets an argument user underscore ID, which is a string. We use this ID to query chats collections for all chats. The user array contains the user underscore ID argument and return it from the function. Okay, let's head back to the chat, the sidebar component where we'll create a new stateful variable chats. So we set up a message use effect hook to help us update the chat with the value returned from the get user chats function. Okay, then we'll loop through the chat array and render at the UI the chat. Now the users can easily chat with their friends. Let's send the other guy a message. Hello John, we need to find a way to update the chat array anytime the user sends a new message to someone they have not previously had a conversation with. Okay, but I'm going to let you figure that out. It should be easy if you have followed all along. I would have loved to add the ability to upload files, but Firebase has taken Firebase storage off the free plan. Found this video fun? Absolutely smash that like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can get access to all of our videos in the future as they drop. If you want to see me use another software as a service platform like Superbase, what if you think we should build a server to process the authentication and database and file upload using TypeScript of Go? Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can get access to all these and more. You can find the link to the code on GitHub. Get the link in the description. I'm going to see you in the next video.